Hey everybody, it's Krista. This is Bad at Keeping Secrets, and this is super indulgent of me to invite both Somer Love and Julia Rae, two of my idols here today to offer up. I realize this is going to put a lot of pressure on you to offer up some hope. I've been going through kind of a struggle time, and I think I look to both of you whenever I need a little pick me up on what is possible in life. And so I think maybe I'll start off with if you both would do a little brief bio, because I didn't know about either of you until my daughter was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis in 2019. And then I became like obsessed with anyone I could find. And I feel like, Julia, you were all the news when Listen to Your Heart came out. I feel like everyone in my community was like, oh, your daughter has CF. Have you seen Julia Rae? And I'd be like, yes. I follow her. And then Somer, thank you so much again for asking me to be on Summer Nights last year and to talk about my experience with CF. And now I'm going to turn the tables and force you to both introduce yourselves.
All right, Julia. Oh, okay. I'll go first. So my name is Somer Love, and I was born in 1979, so I am now 44 years old, which is huge, and I celebrate it every day. Because I was diagnosed at 11 months old with cystic fibrosis, and back in the 1980s, there just was not much that was known about CF, and we've come so far with the medical advancements. And they told my parents, the doctor said, just take her home and love her. She might not make it to be 10. And so I just feel like, I celebrate life, and I've advocated, and my parents did everything that they could possibly do for CF. And then when I was old enough, I joined the fight and in my own way. And that's when I started Love to Breathe in 2001. And I had a blog, back in the day when blogging was a thing. And I did it to provide hope, for people like you, Krista, newly diagnosed families with cystic fibrosis, so they could see an adult out there, living and thriving despite the hardships that CF brings, because it does bring, hardships. And I think I don't want to speak for Julia, but I think I do what I do, and I think she does what she does for the younger generation and for your daughter. And that's why we do what we do. And I'm honored to be here, so thank you. And I am an artist as well, so like seeing you and following you is inspiring. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
I think it's really cool, to think about. I think when I first found you, Somer, you were on oxygen, and this was before you started taking Trikafta. Mm-hmm. And it was that. I would love to hear a little bit more a little bit later about the transition for you.
I'm still on oxygen. I need it with exertion. So, but if I'm sitting, I am okay. So it's been really great. And, I'll just say real fast, I got sick in September of last year, and it's taken me 10 months because I was, back on it again, round the clock, continuously, and living life on a leash is really hard. And so it's taken me 10 months to get back to be able to sit here and talk to you without the oxygen, which is a lot. But here I am.
Glad you're feeling better. Thank you for introducing yourself.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I feel like this is just an inspiration fest, because I've always looked up to Somer and certainly put her on a pedestal when I started my own advocacy work. And of course, Carissa, connecting with you has been so magical. So I just love this, such a good vibe. But I'm Julia. I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis before I was born. My older brother also has CF. And I grew up always knowing that I had CF, not really understanding that until, I was 6 or 7, what that meant. But I also always knew I wanted to sing and act and perform. And I feel like both of those things are genetic. That's how like deeply ingrained both of those things are in my body. And I've been doing that all of my life. I was on stage by the time I was 6. And my life has had many twists and turns, and my path to my dream has not been linear, as is, I find most people, CF or not. And I find comfort in knowing that, that I'm not alone, even though sometimes it feels that way, since cystic fibrosis is a rare disease. But yeah, I just filmed a feature film. I'm going to be starring in that next year. It'll come out, and I am actually announcing here for the first time that I'm moving to Nashville because I have a lot of traction and opportunity with my music career there. And I'm really excited for the future in a way that I never thought possible, thanks to the medical advancements that I'm sure we'll dive into more in this conversation. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Julia, and thanks for announcing that you're moving to Nashville, but that's sad for California. I was wondering, Julia, will you kind of, if it's okay with you, will you kind of, for the people who aren't familiar with what cystic fibrosis is, do you mind giving us like a brief overview of what it is, and then also how you were diagnosed?
Yes. So cystic fibrosis is a rare genetic, life-threatening, and sometimes they use the words life-limiting, though I never am a fan of that wording, disease. It affects the lungs and digestive system, but really it affects your whole body and your mind, as a chronic illness does. And growing up, as Somer mentioned, our lifespan, when Somer was born was 10 years old. When I was born, it was, around high school, college age. And now it's grown exponentially thanks to these medical advancements. I was diagnosed in utero. So because my brother was diagnosed at the age of 2, when my mom was pregnant with me, they knew to screen for cystic fibrosis because there is something that can happen during pregnancy called meconium ileus to the unborn baby that is very hard for the baby and the mother, and does change the trajectory of the illness for everyone involved. So yeah, that's.
So Somer, you said you were diagnosed at 11 months,
11
right?
months old. Yeah.
What were your symptoms, or what was the early sort of chapter of your life?
I had 0 symptoms. It's crazy how I was diagnosed. My diagnosis story was, there was an ad in the newspaper, an article that came out, and the ad was from the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation that said, kiss your baby. And so my mom, it was like, described like, if they taste salty, get them in for a sweat test, they could have cystic fibrosis. So my brother and I, we had just moved to Salt Lake City, so I think it's all just like meant to be. But we were outside in the playpen, and we were out there, and so my mom, like, after reading that, she comes running out and licking my brother and I, and I guess was tasting extremely salty, but I was like a huge, fat, chunky baby, so not malnourished in any way, which is another symptom of cystic fibrosis. And so she called the pediatrician and was like, yeah, I need to get my daughter in for this sweat test. And he's like, I assure you, your daughter does not have cystic fibrosis. She's so, healthy, and she's off the charts in her weight. Like, she's fine. And my mom, like, I think it's the mother's intuition, like, proceeded to just say, I advocated to, like, get me to get this sweat test. And he finally agreed to do it. They took me down. And he called her the next day crying and was like, your daughter does have cystic fibrosis. And my brother's a carrier, but he does not have CF. So luckily, like, I feel like, before things happened, or before there were any symptoms, or, any lung damage that could have happened, I was diagnosed. And almost like newborn screening before that was even like a situation. So yeah, just kind of on a whim, and grateful for that, the ad, that campaign that the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation ran.
Do all 50 states now have early screening?
Yes.
And do you know, Do you either of you know why, or the relationship of cystic fibrosis and early screening?
I think
Oh, go ahead, Julia.
the motivation for the early screening is meconium is to monitor the pregnancy. And they are able to tell, but that's the extent of knowledge I have.
Yeah, and I would just think like the sooner the better, because then you can start, medications that can help you thrive, rather than, being the malnourished, and start treatments for your lungs, because the damage is, happening. So I think just the earlier intervention, the better.
I think the rumor that I had heard that the reason, so Margaret was diagnosed, she had like a small amount of blood taken from her heel when she was born. And I heard that in California, it was because one of the governors had like a relative who had CF. And so the story may not be true. I'm just saying but I think it's sort of interesting that like, that CF is behind potentially all of these other early diagnostic tools that could help people's lives, extend people's lives by knowing earlier.
And that was only 14 years ago. So, there was a whole time where it wasn't part of newborn screening.
Wait, so I guess I should ask, so when you were born, Summer, and your mother, I can't imagine being well, I guess I can imagine having receiving the news that my child has CF. When was the first time you felt maybe, and do you feel different from other humans by having cystic fibrosis? I'm sorry about my stubble.
Oh yeah, my parents, like, their philosophy has always been to live life. And right when they told my parents, like, take her home, love her, she's, you should only make it to be 10, they were like, hell no. And they like advocated, they started the local chapter here for Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. They did everything in their power to like figure out how to make me live a long, healthy life. And so I kind of just adopted that philosophy. And like, I was very athletic growing up. I was in sports. I danced. I was a cheerleader. I did all the things because I feel like I was just trying to jam pack as much life into whatever my life may be, right? So, and I feel like I'm still doing that. So it's like, I just feel like I want to experience it all. And that was their philosophy, is like, you're Summer, but then you also have cystic fibrosis. And I think, so I didn't really feel different. I had to wake up early, and my mom, would pound me, is what we called it, but it's CPT. And, like, I would have to do nebulized treatments. I'd have to go in the hospital. And I think I grew up to not really telling people. I was very private about my cystic fibrosis growing up, mostly because I didn't want to be treated differently. And I wanted to have all the same opportunities as everyone else without that, like, hanging over my head. And so I think that's just my mentality of growing up, is like, and like Julia said, people say sometimes life limiting, but that wasn't vocabulary in my family. So
that's a lot of, can you talk a little bit about the pressure of that, having to fit all of this life? And
yeah.
in some ways I think when I think about this, because I feel this way towards Margaret, like, oh, I have to fit. Well, I'm actually really confused about the whole situation, because I think I'm at this point, this position of privilege, where her life expectancy is fabulous, potentially.
Right. Yeah.
But there's like an unknown. But in some ways, something I tell myself to like self-soothe is like, nobody knows how long we're going to get to be here and how much time we'll have. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, if you found that was sort of exciting, but also the pressure of having to fit, to fit as much as you can in.
And I don't think that none of that was like that wasn't pressured on me or anything. That was me. Like, that's just who I am. Like, I'm very motivated. I'm very independent. I want to experience as many things as possible. And so I feel like when I don't know what age it was, but when I first learned about the life expectancy or like realized, like, I think there was a movie that came out called Alex, and I wasn't supposed to watch it, but I watched it. And then I was like, okay, this, it was eye-opening for me. And I was like, going in the hospital, I would go in like once a year growing up, and I started at age 5. And I would, then I started to realize, like, okay, well, yeah, this is serious, and so I think I put the pressure on myself. And I think, when I was 15, I had 3 jobs, but my brothers, they didn't have one till they were 18, so it's like I did it myself. Like, I wanted to, like, be the best babysitter. I wanted to, probably a little bit of a perfectionist, but I just felt like I'm, maybe still am living with like this invisible clock that just is ticking over my head. And so I just want to experience all that I can while I'm here. I mean, I think everybody does in some way, but I feel like maybe mine's just like a little bit elevated more. I don't know.
Julia, what about you? Was there a moment when you sort of felt, I mean, a little bit different, or that you had your life, your schedule was maybe different, or your clock was kind of going at a different speed than other people?
Yeah, I mean, I share so many similarities with Summer as far as zest for life and outlook and wanting to get it all in. But I do remember very vividly when I was hospitalized at 6 years old and realizing that my classmates came and visited me and I had never gone to visit them. And so that did prompt some why me questions. Later I have this diary that I started writing a book for CF parents in 3rd grade. And I write all about how, like, you should let your child cry hysterically if they need to get their emotions out. And that was very much how I, at a very young age, started to articulate my feelings about having a chronic illness. Because I had my older brother built in, I never felt really alone in the daily therapies or the fact that this was a burden on me. And I very quickly, I was raised by parents similar to Summer, who made it very apparent to me very young that this is what I was given, and there are children with other ailments or challenges or battles that they face. And so this is mine, and it's how I choose to deal with it and how I choose to, deal with the cards I was dealt. And so in many ways, I think I just took that on as a challenge, like, oh, okay, well, like, this will be part of my story and I get to write my story still. CF didn't take my story away. It's just a page in it. And that's always the way that I viewed life. And that's probably why I feel like I've gone after my dreams full force, even when perhaps it didn't make a ton of sense. So yeah, I think it informs the outlook that you have on life.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the relationship of siblings that have CF, and then also the 6-foot rule.
Yeah. So there is infection control with cystic fibrosis, which didn't really occur until I think about like 2011 or 12, when the new rules came out that were more, absolutely strict about only having one CF person at a fundraiser. And if there were more, it had to be outdoors. Because there is such a need for infection control with cystic fibrosis. It's very easy for us to pass on bacteria infections to each other. So but growing up, we didn't know that. My mom used to host a massive Christmas party in Philadelphia for all the CF patients and their families. So like the rapidity of the scientific advancements is wild when you look back in our lives. I'm sure Summer, you feel that way with your life. Like it is wild to think about what was acceptable then and what isn't now. But when I was 17, I had MRSA in my lungs, and it was the scariest moment in my life with cystic fibrosis. It was the sickest I had been, and I was allergic to every intravenous antibiotic they wanted to try to eradicate it, and I was not doing well. That was the first time in my life where my brother was absolutely not allowed to see me. Typically, when I was hospitalized, he didn't come to the hospital because bacteria like MRSA does live in hospitals. So the hospital's, the worst place for us to go. But that was the first time where it was like really in our faces that CF would come in the way of our relationship. We have a beautiful relationship, I think, because we share this battle. We also have an oldest brother who does not have CF. And he's our like number one support system. He's, buying soft pretzels because they're my favorite snack for the entire nurses unit on the floor when I'm hospitalized. He's, bringing cheesecake in for everyone, also my favorite. So, I think your support system becomes absolutely vital when you're battling a chronic illness. And I do think in a double-edged sword way, when my mom got the news that I had CF, the geneticist called and said, I have good news. You're going to have your baby girl. But she is going to share the pathology with her brother. And I thought that was a really beautiful way to phrase this devastating news. And actually the geneticist also stated what you so beautifully stated, Carissa, which was the only difference between the battles that Julia and Will, my brother with CF, are going to face, and the battles that you'll face with James, are that you can put a name right now to Will and Julia's battle. And James will have a battle or two, and you don't know what that they are yet. I thought that was super powerful and kind of shaped our whole family's view of CF.
I view that statement in two different ways. Like on the one hand, I feel like it is, like all things, they're so multifaceted. On the one hand, yeah, it is a battle that we can name, and that we just don't know other people's battles. But at the same time, I'm curious to hear your perspective on it. It feels like in some ways it is really hard.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the amount of the history that both of you have gone through, because I've only been doing this for 4 years. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk, if either of you would want to talk about maybe what brings you hope, or how do you keep going when you're faced with this. It was MRSA infection, and then you said a little bit about community, but are there any other do either of you have a faith structure or I guess spiritual life that you'd be willing to share with us?
I have a deep faith in spirituality. I rely heavily on that, but more so for me, my spirituality comes from turning back to service. When I was battling MRSA, that's really when I poured my heart and soul into my nonprofit, because the only way out that I could see was if I could feel purpose-driven and purposeful. Because what was it all for, if not for others? And so a lot of my spirituality ends up coming and circling back to service. And I always find, whether it's CF related or dark days related to something else, that is the thing that gets me out of the hole always, consistently.
Do you think it's because you're a 4?
Probably.
Sorry. Are you also a 4? An Enneagram 4?
I have no idea.
Oh,
Oh.
we have Summer doing the Enneagram.
Yeah, let's figure that out. That would be fun. But and I 1,000% agree with you, Julia. It's like, I think that's what spreading love is like my thing to do. Like, I just love it so much. And I feel like I sometimes feel selfish in doing that, because like the reward I feel when, like, after I do an act of kindness or service or anything, it just fills up my cup. And I think that's my why. And yeah, I just love to spread love with every breath that I have. And it's kind of just what Love to Breathe is based off of. And, I just, if I can, why not make the world a better place if you can, right? And, and I want to touch back a little bit too, when you said, Julia, that your parents knew what your brothers and your struggle was going to be, was cystic fibrosis, but you just didn't know what your other brother's struggle was going to be, and I feel like that's so true, because I feel like everybody is struggling with something, every single person on this planet. And I think it's just like you said, it's like we got the cards that we were dealt. And I feel like our philosophy is just play the hell out of that hand, right? And we're doing it. And I think CF is hard, and it's every day is different with CF. And I think especially for, like, it's called advanced lung disease, but I like to refer to it as established lung disease. It just sounds so much better. But I'm still doing 5 treatments a day, and it is hard. And CF has not been an easy journey, but the reward I have gotten from living this life is priceless. Like, I wouldn't change it. So it's just,
I think for me, I'm a bit, I guess, I don't know, bittersweet, in the sense that the only thing last night our couples therapist was like, "Oh, Carissa, you're so into silver linings." And it's like, actually, I've never heard anyone say that to me, because I'm more of like a wallower. And for me, I think when I think about hardship and the role of hardship and my appreciation for it, I think about it being really connected to creativity and self-expression, and like that, not like the role of being in pain is then to create something beautiful out of it. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the relationship to, because both of you identify it as artists.
yeah. And I think too, that's a beautiful outlet that, we do have, and does help us process things. Like, my medium is paint. And so when I'm painting, like, it's almost as if that clock that's been over my head it stands still for a little bit, And so when you can find an outlet that helps with that, and, helps you process things, like, that's a beautiful gift that I feel like all 3 of us were given. But yeah, and I would love to ask you, Carissa, like, so for Julia and I, like, CF is our life, right? It's part of our life. And we don't know any different. We don't know our lives without CF. But for me, like, I think I can't imagine, like, my child having CF. So I always, like, I don't know if it's helpful, but I feel like it would be harder. It's harder on the parents to see their children go through this battle. And I think it's harder on the parents than it is us. Like, that's how I feel. So
That's how I feel as well.
yeah.
Summer, I think that's really generous of you. I do think, like, since having Margaret, we used to have this rule in our household, like, whoever is having the breakdown first the other person has to support the person having a breakdown. And breakdown could be anything, just having a hard day, whatever. But now the highlighted interconnectedness of our emotions, like, it's really difficult to know whose pain is whose, if that makes sense. Like, even though to see, like, it's almost not comparable to see someone else in pain and how you experience that as another person. It's really difficult to define. And I feel like our culture, we've been taught to value the person in pain and not the people who love the person in pain. But I think that they're on the same, thank you for saying that, because I feel like they're different, but they're also horizontally painful, like on the same horizontal spectrum of pain, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I just actually got a text message from one of my girlfriends who became a new mom, and her daughter had croup, and she texted me.
That's going around right now.
Yes.
Sorry.
She had so much wisdom to say. I'm just thinking of your mom 31 years ago and how I'm a wreck because my baby has croup, but that'll pass. And like what your mom must have been going through when you were this age. And I think about it all the time because I also have these memories of being in the hospital and like I'm taking the information, and my mom is strong as hell. Like she's a force, but I could see the pain in her face, in her heart, like I'm choking up now thinking about it. Like, and I think it is harder on the parent. It's actually harder for me to watch her watch me than it is for me to hear, like, I'm like, oh, my IV blew, give me another one, like whatever it is, I can take it. But like watching others deal with the pain is actually so much harder. And I don't know if that's just, sometimes I think we as I don't know, like, and maybe I'm super overgeneralizing, but like have this wherewithal to emotionally deal with this chronic illness because it's our life. Like we have no other choice. And on some level, like we feel, a guilt for the people that love us. And I think that may be what makes it so hard. Because we want the people that we love to be happy too.
Do you feel like you protect the people around you too, Julia? Like, and just be stronger than maybe sometimes that we are, like just to protect them and protect their hearts. And I find myself doing that a lot, and which also can be exhausting, but my support system means the world to me. And I feel like I do try to protect them often. So yeah.
Yes, likewise.
How do you find that balance between protecting other people, but also honoring what you're going through?
I don't know about you, Summer, but sometimes I feel like I don't realize it until like way after the fact. When I'm really processing what I have been through or am going through, it's almost like second nature to kick into. Like, I'm fine. It's fine. Yeah. So I don't know that it really is like a conscious choice. It's just the only choice that I see in the moment for me.
I think that, oh, sorry. I was going to say that I think that the story I've been telling myself maybe the past 6 months, whenever I have behavior that seems automatic, I think about like, this was the way my young self learned to cope, and to get through. And the behavior isn't always like, oftentimes it's maladaptive. But I don't know anything else, if that makes sense. Sorry, Summer, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. Just saying, I mean, I agree. It's just, that's just I think that's just how we process everything. And, and as we're going through it, and we don't even like that. I feel like this year too, for me, like the last 3 years were, I finally realized they were a little harder on me than I allowed myself to, feel the hardships of the last 3 years. And I just feel like now this year, I feel like I'm embarking on this new chapter in my life, and I am getting older, and aging with CF is a whole nother thing. And I just feel like it's this, as I'm embarking on this journey, I'm like, I gotta come back to me, and like I need to take this year. My word for this year was healing, and it's definitely not linear, and there's so much unknown, and But I think that is like the beauty of it, and the excitement of it all is of the unknown of like what's to come, you know. I don't.
And because I think that it's weird to be like, oh, I'm interested in the pain of getting older with CF because I'm so excited that you're getting older. Can you talk a little bit about navigating? And was there a point? Do you take Trikafta? Do both of you?
I do, yes. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could also talk about when you talk about what it's like to be sort of getting older, and I think you said earlier pre-perimenopausal, and then also having what it was like for you when you started taking modulators.
Yeah, so I started Trikafta in 2019, and you know, before, I don't really like to talk about like my lung function, but I will here. I feel like it's important to know that, like, you know, before I started Trikafta, I was stable, but continually my lung function was in the 20s. So 20% of my lungs. So, you know, now that I have been on Trikafta and like my body is changing like significantly, I don't know about you, Julia, but like, so just Trikafta in general has changed my body completely from what I knew. So I feel like, you know, as a CF patient, we know our body so well. And now it's just kind of a little bit chaotic. And also I'm getting older. And so now I have aging to like throw into the mix. And yes, perimenopause, like nobody talks about that. And it's like I'm in the thick of it. And so that, and every day, like earlier, Julia, I was telling Krista, I was at a concert last night and I had to wear earplugs. And I'm like, oh, I'm 97. Like I am 97 years old. Like I couldn't, like it was hurting my ears. And then I got home and I Googled, like, I'm like, is this ear sensitivity? Is that like a new thing? And sure enough, like if estrogen levels are low, like, you know, it can cause your ears to have like be sensitive and inner ear issues. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm just rolling with it. That's part of this journey this year and healing. And, but it's aging is such a gift, you know, and it's such a privilege that is denied by so many people. And I've had so many friends that have gone before me that have had CF. And I feel like every birthday I celebrate my half birthday. I do love getting older. And I always was like, no Botox for me. I will embrace it all. But now that the wrinkles are here, I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe we'll see what happens. But it is a gift, and you know, and I celebrate that gift every day, and also honoring my friends that have gone before me with CF, because you know, now that there's cross infection here, and this community is online, and the CF community is unmatched, and it is the most amazing community, and I am honored to be a part of it because we all get it. You know, it's like, it's really refreshing to be surrounded by people that get what you're going through. And now that there are others that are getting older and we're going through this journey, it's just refreshing to like navigate it all, you know, and it is unknown, and it's unknown, like charted territory, because even sometimes our doctors are like, I don't know. It's like, because it's really like, now that we're all getting older with these medical advancements, like it is uncharted territory, and we're living in it and like making history at the same time. I don't know. It's wild to wrap your head around.
Really quickly, Summer, do you have any celebration rituals that you do that kind of to celebrate aging, or practices that you do when you use the word celebrate? I'm just curious.
As far as like my birthdays go, or
or like half birthdays, or how do you mark it, or
well, so my parents, when they, you know, they're like, oh, there are only 10 birthdays. Well, we're going to go big. So my first birthday was like bounce houses, clowns, pony rides, like cotton candy machines. Like it was huge. And then they kind of just like shot themselves in the foot because like every year I'm like, let's go big, you know? And I remember like, so I have themes for my birthdays. So I just turned 44. So my theme for 44 was 40 fortunate, and it's 44 TUNATE. And because I do feel so fortunate that, you know, I'm here and I'm getting older. And I remember my 30th birthday, my family like had a billboard for me, and so that was like a way to celebrate. And then again on my 40th, same thing. And it, you know, it has my website on there, and so people have learned about cystic fibrosis through that. But one of my favorite stories is my friend now saw my 30th birthday billboard, excuse me, and she, like, they were driving by it, and her husband was like, some spoiled girl has a billboard for her birthday, like, you know, kind of just like making fun of it. And she goes, I just think there might be something more to it, because there's her website. And so she actually went to my website, learned all about cystic fibrosis, and started being involved in, you know, CF charities. And 4 years later, her son was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. And she said all she could think about when the doctors are giving her this diagnosis was the girl, billboard 30, like that, just like over and over, like billboard 30, like kept going over her head, because like she's like, he's going to be okay. And so, and it gives me chills every time I tell that story, but it is so powerful. And I think that's what awareness is all about, because I feel like more and more people are learning about what cystic fibrosis is, but there's still so much that people don't know, and there is still so much unknown. And we still have, you know, we're still working to find that cure for the younger generation. So I think that's just kind of why Julia and I are so active in the community and bring awareness to whatever possible projects we're working on or whatever. We always try to like weave that in, because it is so important to us.
I think that, would you say that, well, thank you so much for putting yourself out there. And there's a certain amount of vulnerability that you have to, I think it acknowledges the beauty in that, with the story with the billboard. But both of you, I think, present different angles of CF. Because I think, Summer, you talk presentation wise, I think that there's a centrality to it when I visit Love to Breathe. But then also, I think this is a really nice illustration of how different people need different things, or feel good about having multiple focuses. Because when I feel like I was introduced to Julia's work, I think that in some ways your cystic fibrosis was really downplayed. And it was more about like a love story. And I think I was wondering if you could kind of talk about how you, maybe Julia, choose when you want to have the conversation about cystic fibrosis. Because I think that both of you obviously make really deliberate decisions on when it's part of the conversation.
Yeah. For me growing up, I, like Summer, did not share that I had CF with anyone. For me, that was because I didn't want directors of the professional productions that I was auditioning for to discount me. I also certainly didn't want them to give me anything out of pity. And so I kept it to myself. And my mom was always like, but what if you get sick? And I said, we'll deal with it if it happens. Like, I was like, that's not today. And I moved through my life with that mentality until I was 16. And in an effort to get on another stage, I entered Miss Pennsylvania Teen, and I had to have a service platform. And I toyed around with a bunch of ideas of what would be my community service platform. And it never crossed my mind that cystic fibrosis would have anything to do with that, except that I felt like I was doing such a disservice, that if I were to become Miss Pennsylvania Teen and have this platform and go to Miss America Teen, wow, what a shame if I didn't talk about cystic fibrosis. And so that's when I started, and it just came to me one day that, well, my talent is singing, and I'll sing at the top of my lungs for cystic fibrosis. And I ended up winning Miss Pennsylvania Teen, and that whole year dedicated that year to advocacy work, and made it a 501c3 nonprofit, made Singing at the Top of My Lungs a 501c3 nonprofit in order to continue that work. After I gave up my crown, I was not a pageant girl at heart, by the way. This was very much out of my tomboy realm. But it ended up starting a beautiful journey for me that has been very fulfilling for me. As I talked about earlier, service, I think, is the thing that can pull people out of darkness. Certainly what I have found to work for myself. But I think there's always that balance for me of sharing my story continues today. I'm very public. If you Google my name, it's the first or second thing that comes up. Julia Rae has cystic fibrosis. There's no getting away from it. But it is a balance for me because it's not the end of my bio either. And I've always wanted to make sure that, you know, when I look at my peers that are performers, they're performers. They're not performers with a chronic illness. And I never want to be that. I think, Carissa, you were introduced to me when I was on Listen to Your Heart, and I haven't publicly spoken about that since my contract has ended with that franchise. But now that it is over, I can talk more freely. I wanted CF to be a focus on that show. I very publicly did all of my breathing treatments every single day on that show. Unfortunately, I don't get to control the edit of a reality TV show. And it was deeply disappointing and heartbreaking for me that the only mention of CF was in passing. I don't like doing my breathing treatments publicly. That isn't something I took lightly. I made a very distinct choice to allow the cameras into the room when I was doing that. But that was footage that was never shared with America. And I thought that was such a shame because I really wanted that for the little girl in me.
I thought that was really fucked up.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
As someone who, I also have a younger sister who's done a bit of reality TV, and like the amount of control, I mean, you basically sign over how an editor is going to think that other people are going to villainize you or like you least. They're going to choose whatever segment that it, or it just feels like that's how it is. And anything humanizing about you is like, yeah, thrown out the door. And I felt like, yeah, no, I was upset for you. Sorry.
Yeah. I was very upset. I had a lot of conversations with producers who claimed that that footage was lost.
Oh, so. Well, thanks for keeping going and for talking about it. Because yeah, I think everybody, or at least I was watching only to see you and to have like this conversation about cystic fibrosis. I mean, I like the show. It was entertaining. I love reality TV. I feel like reality TV is, I don't know, it's designed to like stimulate pleasure centers in our brains in ways, but I think, I don't know. I just wanted to say we are all rooting for you, obviously. I think the last thing, since we're over time, I wanted to talk a little bit about was I feel like we should talk a little bit about your move to Nashville and writing songs, and maybe sort of your creative process. But also, I really want to ask both of you about how you feel about gene editing and CRISPR and the future. Do you mind, Julia, talking a little bit about what's next for you in terms of your move to Nashville and singing, and then talking a little bit about CRISPR?
Yeah. So for me, my dream from day one, I mean, I don't come from a musical family at all, but I was singing in my crib. My mom says I was singing myself awake all the time. And I knew that I wanted to be a performer for the rest of my life from a very young age, and tried to take steps to make that happen. And several times cystic fibrosis got in the way. And then in 2017, I was eligible to take Kaleido, the first modulator, and then Trikafta. And originally my dream was to be on Broadway. And as I got older, I realized my stamina pre-modulator would have never, ever been able to do 8 shows a week. And I had to edit my dreams. And then I found songwriting and recording, and I was like, oh, this is manageable. I can do this. And so this is an extension of that for me. Now that I am on the modulators and the veil of lifespan has been lifted for me, I view my life the way others, I think, view their life always. And that's that I don't have a lifespan in my horizon, and that now, why wouldn't I go chase my dreams? Who cares that I'm older now? I don't. And if anyone else does, that's their problem. So I am headed to Nashville. I have written music in the last year that I'm really, really proud of. I write songs all the time. It is therapeutic for me, and it's an extension of my life experience, and one that I feel like I have a lot of. And so I'm really excited to continue the journey, and whatever that means. I think you grew up with this like vision of success as a performer, and I've learned that success comes in many forms, and as long as I'm still doing it, I'm successful.
Thanks for sharing, Julia. I want to tell you, so my sister also really wants to be a pop star, and but she's 36, and she always says like, oh, I'm too old to do this. But I think if there's so many, I really love the definition of success being doing what you love and not necessarily having external, like the sort of prescribed external validation. But then I think of people like, I don't know if you are, my favorite musician ever is Robin and Kylie Minogue, and like there's so many. I just, anyway, thank you for sharing. Sorry, that was long-winded. Maybe Summer, will you talk a little bit about your dreams as well, and then also gene editing?
Sure. So I think I don't know what's next for me. I think right now I'm just focusing on just being in the moment and, living life, being mindful of that, and just, focusing on what's happening now rather than, the future, or the past, or whatever. I think society norms, or I've always tried to like break out of those and be different and be unique and embracing myself, because I feel like the world will always try to change us, right? And I think sticking to who you are and just being like embracing your uniqueness, I feel like is what I'm focused on, especially now this year, is like I figure out what's next for me and my successes. I have that's just kind of what I'm focusing on. So it seems very it's very out of the norm for me to, like, instead of being like, what else, what's next, and so I'm just kind of celebrating the moment and just my dreams, like maybe whatever my like favorite moments are, maybe they haven't happened yet, I don't know, but I just trying to figure out what that is and what that looks like, and navigating getting older with CF, which is it's such a blessing. So just trying to figure that out. No big deal. But and as far as like, I love science. As far as gene editing goes, I don't really know what I think about it. I'm a big, like, science is a little way over my head. I am a creative person, so I don't know if I know the logistics of everything. So I can't really speak on it because I don't know if I understand it all. Like, it's way over my head. But all I know is that from the get-go, when I was 11 months old and we found out that I did have CF, like, the thing that I have been like every day, like, focused on is a cure for CF. And it's just been my life's mission. And, you know, whatever I can do to get us closer to that, I feel is like, that's just what I'm trying to do. So I don't know what that means as far as like with gene editing and science and all the things, but we'll just keep plugging along, I guess.
Thanks, Summer. I also feel like there's like so much research that like people who live in the moment are they enjoy life the most. I need to take a page from your book and try to live more in the moment. I've been really trying to, my partner's friends with the patent attorney for Jennifer Downer, and I really want her to talk to me about CRISPR. But I'm working up the guts to write to her right now, and maybe she'll break it down for us. Did I say her last name right? Do you know who I'm talking about?
I do not.
I think you're saying her name right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. She, I think in 2016, she won the Nobel Prize for her gene editing software. And apparently, I think I read on CF News that I think they're going to trials. Is this true?
I think so. I'm actually looking up for us.
Okay. We were told, I think, at our last CF clinic that they anticipated it would be ready for Margaret when she was around 10, which is, she's turning 4 in a month. So I think, I don't know, I'm feeling cautiously optimistic about.
And you know what? You should reach out to her, because I just found a letter that I guess my mom and I never sent, because I wrote Dr. Francis Collins a letter.
Oh, really?
When I was 10, a thank you note for finding the CF gene. And now I'm like, I need to track him down somehow and get this thank you note that 10-year-old me wrote to him, because it's hysterical. I have a Les Mis reference in there just so you can get some idea of 10-year-old Julia.
Well, I really want to read your 6-year-old guide for parents of people who have CF, because I feel
and when you said cry like hysterically and like get it all out, like I'm all, like immediately I'm like, that is great airway clearance. Like that, yes, do that.
I said fill gallons. Like, I mean, yeah, it's priceless. It's hysterical. That's for sure.
It's interesting to think. Do you think about the lineage of like the topics that you chose to write about, and how your style kind of sticks with you throughout your life, Julia, in terms of your creative expression?
Yes. I mean, when I look back, even when I look at like these diaries that I kept as a young girl, and I look at speeches I've written for CF or healthcare functions, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is who I am. And that was very much determined even as a 6-year-old with 6-year-old vocabulary. Like it is very fascinating to see. I even found like one of the first songs I wrote in a notebook, and then I looked at the structure of it and I was like, oh, even, you know, it's why songwriters have like a style that is so unique to them. And I was like, oh my gosh, even like songwriting, wow, I guess I should develop further, or this is just where it's always
gonna be. No.
gonna be.
Well, thank you both for doing this with me, and for sharing your stories, and for showing up in beautiful ways that you both do on the daily, getting out of bed in the morning, and also letting me be really emotional. This topic is just a really intense one, I think, for all of us, and sharing your story really, 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 really gives me hope. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, thank you for having us.